a side note. Oh, excellent. You're recording. That's another thing I've done before is forget to hit the record button. Done it all. Thank you so much for having me, Brian. And I just want to briefly take a moment to thank Raven Chapbooks and Diana Hayes. What you win when you win this contest is that they publish your book, and it's not just that they publish your book, they take your book and they make it the most beautiful object that you could possibly have imagined it could ever become. And that is what I have. I don't know if that's visible at all. That's what I have in my hands. And for anyone who's non-sighted in the audience, it's just a white cover with a smaller square with a photograph of looking up at bull kelp through the underwater with the sunlight filtering down from above. And this beautiful photo was taken by my favorite underwater photographer, Jackie Hildering. I'm a huge fan of hers. She goes by the Marine Detective on Facebook. And she actually has inspired some of the poems in this book just from years of kind of watching her feed and learning about species that I didn't really know very much about. And she was a huge part of deepening my understanding of this environment that I was writing about. So also just thanks to Jackie for letting us use this beautiful photo. That was a huge fangirl moment for me when we got that on the cover. And yeah, I love this book more and more every time I look at it. And as a bookseller as well, I manage Russell Books on Fort Street in Victoria. I have lots of feelings about books as physical objects. So it's such a dream to have this book become its best possible physical manifestation. So thank you, Diana. You're really doing wonderful work. And if you're a poet, you should definitely submit next year. It's such a dream. So I'm just going to start reading. And I'm going to start with the poem that opens the book. And this poem grew out of some years of opening a lot of poetry readings and opening with an acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement, and just a growing feeling of inadequacy, as I would say those words, the inadequacy of even though it's an important thing to do, it just didn't feel like enough. So this poem is called I'd Like to Start by Acknowledging. I'd like to start by acknowledging that this poem is being written on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I have no idea what that means. I have the luxury of continuing to live my life without understanding what I've stolen. I'd like to start by acknowledging that my life takes place where someone else's life should be happening. That where my apartment building sits, someone should be gathering camas bulbs, but instead, not far away, she's boiling water for her baby's formula. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I fit perfectly into this long, slow genocide, this machinery so silent that I was born and raised on top of its invisible back without ever hearing the sound of people dying, the sound of people rising, protecting, fighting. This machinery can't stop killing, cradles my body as precious, but when I'm not in the room, bullets just slip out, as though death is a natural byproduct of keeping me safe. I'd like to acknowledge that I don't know how to live here without doing harm, but I don't want to live anywhere else. I'd like to acknowledge that every day I make the choice to live on this land, and I'm saving my money because someday I'd like to buy a piece of it, even though I know it does not belong to the current owners, even though I know we cannot begin to repay what we continue to take. I'd like to acknowledge that I mouth words of acknowledgement, like a spell to ward off colonialism, like a cloak to cover how comfortable I am here, living my life on top of an ongoing struggle for survival. I pronounce and mispronounce these words like a half-learned prayer, like an excuse, like a neon flashing sign that says, it's not me, I didn't do it. As though saying it out loud will somehow make me less complicit. I'd like to acknowledge that this poem was written on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples. Choosing to acknowledge or not acknowledge this truth does not change the fact that I live inside it. Every word that I write, read, think, and speak has the power to reveal or obscure it. And if poetry is a way of learning to know the world, then I want my poems to show this truth, not hide it. And if I'm honest, those are the only two choices. So that's a hard poem for me to read. And I think an important poem to start with, though. So thank you all for being there for that. I just want to mention, I love the illustrations that we have in this book. I have a little starfish drawing beside my next poem, which is about starfish. And it just fills me with joy to have these little drawings in there. So this poem, the next poem I'm going to read, is called Starfish, and it's about starfish wasting disease, which is a mysterious disease that has cropped up in the last few years, not that long that it's really been in existence. And as far as I know, it's still relatively mysterious, thought to be linked to global warming. And it kind of just turns them to goo rather quickly, unfortunately. This poem has an epigraph by the wonderful Jan Zwicky from her poem Apple Song. The epigraph is, "Red one, how strange the leavings of desire. Beloved, I mourn your raspberry collapse. Osmosis dissolves the purple echo until you might never have been. Water still as iron in rock's cupped hand. You were not a star, nor a fish, you ancient miracle of hydraulics, you collection of conscious currents, you linchpin, you zipper, undoing an ecosystem with your death. You who could regrow from a fragment, unraveled in one day. You carried an eye on each bloodless arm, but did not see this coming. I think I'll keep it in the title pools for now. And these are among the poems that really were inspired by Jackie's work. So if you're still someone who frequents Facebook, I highly recommend follow the Marine Detective. You learn all of these fascinating little tidbits. This poem is called Anemone Advice. Stand still long enough to be mistaken for a flower. Paralyze them with their own assumptions. If you want company, tear yourself in half a few times. Get to know yourself through binary fission. Share your flesh with someone who can appreciate it. Invite something photosynthetic inside, like a dinoflagellate. Raise your limbs to the light. You can digest anything if you hold it in your mouth long enough. Snail, crab, apology. Spit out what does not serve you. No point in hanging on to someone else's shell. And also in the title pools, this poem is called Nudibranch. And if you don't know what a nudibranch is, please Google it. You'll thank me later. It's also, I have this little tat here. They are magnificent little shellless mollusks that live in the intertidal zone, lots of them. And they come in all kinds of beautiful different colors. and very extravagant looking creatures. And I just became, I encountered one in a tidal pool on Dallas Road and became obsessed with them for a while. So I learned a lot about them. And just to avoid being horribly confusing, near the end when I'm saying lots of words that don't seem to make sense, those are different names of nudibranch species. Nudibranch. Well, that's one way to deal with fear. Instead of getting harder, cast off the shell, become all soft underbelly, and dare the world to take a bite. What is armor but participation with the predator? Uncaged by calcium, flesh leaps like flame, canary, tangerine, violet, luminous cyan, extravagant ruffles of serrata, so translucent, bits of digestive tract are visible inside. The nudibranch takes a hydroid into its mouth, gently, accepts the polyp's poison, saves explosive defense cells for later. Oh, noble sea lemon, cryptic nudibranch, dubious storid, shag rug, moss landing aelid, oh, Spanish dancer, called inkspot, glaucus, clown, Fuzzyonkadorus, teach me to be soft and inexorable. So I've spent a lot of time poking around in tidal pools and annoying anemones and the other creatures that are in there. But I'm not actually from here, and arriving at the ocean is one of the most profound experiences. This next poem, this next poem is about that, and could also sort of serve as an introduction to this book in a way, because it's about I left Victoria to do my master's in actually library science, Brian, in Halifax, and it was kind of a tough 2 years. And when we got back, we got off the plane and we dumped our bags somewhere and we went straight down to Dallas Road and just sat on the beach and just kind of stared at the ocean and thought, what just happened to us? So this poem is about that. It also has an epigraph from Ofelia Zepeda's poem, Carrying Our Words. This poem is called Sea Shell, and the epigraph is, we travel carrying our words. We arrive at the ocean. We arrived carrying our silence, a shell of unsaid words, secreted over years of surviving back to back against the world. We returned every day, resting in silence on a log, while gribbles carved tiny channels in the wood beneath us. Now, finally, we crack the old shell's hinges and find inside only the gleam of nacre. Now, finally, we leave our silence with the other broken shells on this beach, climb over granite to explore tidal pools. I pry loose a limpet. Under conical shell, a circle of soft flesh puckers, tiny mouth agape. And I should mention, there's not a lot of humans actively present in my poetry, in this book anyway, but in most of these poems, there was somebody standing or sitting beside me for most of the time. So I just wanted to, that's the we in this poem, is my partner, Chris, and I just wanted to thank him for, the book is dedicated to him, and he really introduced me to the Pacific and to the art of beach sitting and beach napping and all the beach things. Okay, so I have another poem, one more mollusk poem that I wanted to read. Big mollusk fan here. And this poem came out of reading an article online about how mollusks build their shells and how the colors come, the different colors in the patterns on their shells happen. It's apparently they taste the old stuff when they're making a new layer of shell, they taste what the old stuff, and it's sort of like tasting memories to know what color to put down next. How much of this I carry with me? In a jar on the mantel, my collection of old fears, blank shards of porous bone, shells eroded to the essential inner curve of the spiral. Mollusks taste memories to build shells, create chevrons and stripes in calcium carbonate. They'll never see their shells from the outside, never notice how much they've revealed. See there, that break in the pattern where loss lies? I always end up reading shells as shelves at least once in that poem. I think maybe because I'm I work in a bookstore. I've got shelves on the brain. Okay, this is how am I doing for time? Are we okay? Yeah. This poem is called Barn Swallow, and it is in 3 parts. 1. Swallows begin all beak, inscrutable sitters in judgment over the parking enclosure. Lemon yellow mouths turn down at the edges, condemning my transportation choices. Open into wide daffodil throats that eclipse the nest when parents come to feed. As weeks pass, they overflow. Untidy bird bouquet, adolescent bodies impossibly inhabit as little space as an egg. One day, the nest is empty, hollow cup of mud, but that night they return, crowd back in, not quite ready. 2. A conversation. Me. Who do you dance for? Swallows. Moths. Me. Where are you going? Swallows. Here. Again and again. Here. And here. And here. Hovering pinpoints of light, of life, spread in a constellation above the bluff. Connect the dots dinner dance. Every moment here. Here. Every wing beat angled exact. Going nowhere but here. And here. And here. 3. Swallows are fractals of form and function. Curvy wings and tail map flight paths full of swoop along the beach. Migration arc symmetrical as a pair of wings down the continent and back. This fall, I noticed their absence from my evening walks. Imagine them arriving in South America, equatorial air spiced with flying ants. I don't picture them dropping from the sky into New Mexico swimming pools, Wisconsin highways. Young birds just learned the knack of slipping past gravity, forget in a haze of smoke. Fat reserves and muscle mass melt away, just feather and bone. Should be lighter than air, but they're not. Feathered rain pelts carports and flower beds, hundreds of thousands, uncountable, unaccountable. Scientists collect bushels of hollow-boned corpses, each load impossibly light, impossibly heavy. I do want to note that there was a somewhat happy ending to that depressing poem because our swallows did make it back, or at least a number of them did. And we, this poem I wrote a couple of years ago, I think the first year of the pandemic, we really got to know the swallows that were nesting in our parking lot. And they're so gorgeous. And then there was a mysterious mass die-off of migratory birds that year during the fall migration. And I was so worried about our swallows, but there's actually a couple of nests right now that are in the midst of fledging. So some of them did survive. And I realize not all of these poems are really show humanity in the best of lights. So I wanted to make sure there was at least one poem that held out a little bit of hope for us as a species. So the next poem is called Hope for the Human Race. Mosquitoes live on nectar, alight on pin cherry blossoms, gentle as butterfly or bee. Extract sweetness with needle noses, leaving no itch. The blood they steal does not sustain them. It's a selfless theft, a desperate protein heist to gain building blocks for the next generation. The snow pool mosquito carries pollen in its eye from orchid to orchid, 1,500 feet above sea level. How the orchid changes the mosquito's view of the world. How the mosquito's gaze carries messages between flowers after dark. How human blood becomes a link in this ancient chain, and we accidentally nourish a constellation of blooms, is proof even the worst pest fulfills a purpose in the ecosystem, despite ourselves. Just want to note beautiful illustrations, so pretty. This is an Ernst Haeckel illustration, a colorful illustration of jellyfish with many streaming, oh, I should know the word for what's coming down there, but tentacles. I guess that's almost certainly the wrong word. It's such a luxury to have so many beautiful illustrations. Okay, so that was right. I thought the next one I would read, give me a wave if I'm running out of time. I was going to do two more. Does that sound okay?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. The next poem is called Swimming Up the Dark. And this is another one of those things that if you spend enough time hanging out on Dallas Road, you will see eventually. And it's one of the weirder things that I've seen down there. So true story. Swimming up the dark. Seagulls troll the shallows, plunge heads below water, surface with wriggling gunnels and swallow them whole. At first, it seems the meal is finished. One gulp. But the fish fights its way back up the gull's throat, swimming up the dark, feathered stream until narrow head protrudes from beak, writhing. A word not yet to be said. The hand of a swimmer going under. The gull chokes it back down, heaving with all the muscles in its throat, every feather on its neck, a sleek hook hauling downward, and the fish sinks for a second time. And I thought I would end with the final poem in the book, which is about kelp. And it again has this lovely illustration of kelp with the holdfast at the bottom, black and white illustration. The holdfast is like a root system, but it's not. Its main purpose is just to attach to something heavy so that the kelp doesn't get washed away. And then it's got the bulbs, which are called nematocysts, and the blades, which the nematocyst holds the blades up high enough to get some light and do photosynthesis. One of the reasons I love these illustrations is that for some of the poems, it gives you a bit of a visual if you haven't actually spent years sitting around looking at these things on the beach and or in Jackie's beautiful photography. Laminarialis, sea to sky bridge, called kelp, mermaid's bladder, giant, bull, highway, fishing line, hose, Ichiama, K'am, Kokwalaut. Bubble heads bob, imitating otters who anchor sleep among fronds, infecting olive bulbs with playful dreams. Torn up by storm, tangle of broken ornaments, beached patchwork wail, beginning to stink. Brainy holdfasts drag rocks up from the deep, grasp tighter as they shrivel. Each mummified cortex will never forget how it felt to be green. Further up the beach, a stray pneumaticist, round among round stones, once rubbery skin, tissue thin, still holds one small sip of air, produced underwater, to lift photosynthetic blades sunward. If I crack the seal, take a breath of custom atmosphere created by submerged cells, dreaming an unknown sky, will I too gain the ability to float close to the light? Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and for taking time out of this glorious sunny day to hear me read.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for that lovely, touching, generous reading. I was keeping an eye on the chat throughout, and I can, I've been having a taste of how much these poems have meant to people, how much people have appreciated them and responded to them. So thank you so much for the gift of these poems.